And because I wear this hat, I need to make sure you know who I am. And as I mentioned, I am Jay, the co-founder of Cultivated Media. And since we launched Cultivated in November of 2023, our goal has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and like this, timely information. We do that through our daily newsletter at Cultivated Daily. We do that through our daily live stream at Cultivated Live. And we do that through programs and events like this. You can find everything we do at cultivated.news, and I'll be putting links about where to find everything in the chat in LinkedIn. So while you're here today, go to this, get our newsletter, follow us on LinkedIn, subscribe to us on YouTube, and all the rest. And I'll put links, as I said, in the chat below or on your screen right, I guess. And with that, it is certainly enough from me. Let's get to what we have coming up. In a moment, I'll welcome up Frank Ongaro. He is the acting executive director of the Minnesota Marijuana Association, to give a bit of a welcome. Then we'll bring up Jason Tarasek, a partner of Vicente, the leading cannabis law firm in America, to dive very deep into Minnesota's path forward. And this is important in the chat. Feel free to ask questions because we'll be peppering Jason and Frank with questions after Jason is done with his presentation. So if you have questions, put it screen right in the chat. It says add a comment. That's where we'll collect questions and get to Frank and Jason after Jason's presentation. And with that, it is my pleasure to welcome up Frank Ongaro, the acting executive director of the Minnesota Marijuana Association. Frank, the stage is yours.
All right. Thanks, Jay. Welcome, everybody. I'm going to be brief so we can get to Jason and get a good update. But I want to thank Jay and Cultivated for partnering with us on this adventure, and Vicente and Jason for doing the heavy lifting as we get going forward. Exciting to see so many people have signed up for this event. Kind of shows you the interest in Minnesota, both within and outside of the state. Thank you to those of you who are already members. That's what makes our association work. And for those of you who are not, get to our website, sodacan.org, and start signing up and being part of the organization. As Jay mentioned, I'm Frank Ongaro. I'm the acting executive director of the Minnesota Marijuana Association. Effectively yesterday, my title changed to retired acting executive director. We just named a new executive director, Fatima Moore. We put out a news release yesterday, so you'll be seeing more of Fatima as the executive director of Minnesota Marijuana Association going forward. It was time to get some young, new energy to move the organization forward as the industry starts getting stood up and the state starts issuing licenses. So we're excited to have her on board. She's a tremendous asset, and she will lead the organization well going forward. It's exciting times in Minnesota, some challenges for the industry, challenges for the regulators, and hopefully everybody working together can get this industry up and going to be successful and profitable for everyone who wants to play in the game. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Jay and let the show roll forward. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Frank. Speaking of that young energy, it's my pleasure now to welcome up Jason Tarasek. He is with Vicente. He's also been a dear friend of mine for over 20 years, certainly before legalization in almost any state was even on the radar, which prompted us to scrounge and find cannabis where we could as we were living in San Francisco. Sorry, Jason, I don't want to get you in trouble with any bar association you may be a member of. But with that, it's my pleasure to welcome up Jason Tarasek. And before he was with Vicente, he founded Minnesota Cannabis Law. So you may have seen him around over the past many years. Jason, welcome.
Thank you, Jay. I think that intro was vague enough that I can avoid any criminal charges. And Jay's known me for a long time, and he certainly knows I'm not that young. But I appreciate the intro, Jay. Hi, everybody. Jason Tarasek with Vicente. I live and work in South Minneapolis. Excited to talk to you about the status of the Minnesota cannabis market. I will unfortunately have to keep prompting Jay to move the slides. So Jay, yes, very good. Look at that. So yes, I am the satellite office in Minnesota for the Vicente firm. Our headquarters is in Denver, Brian Vicente and many people still with the firm were instrumental in getting the Colorado legalization measure passed in 2014. And we've helped cannabis clients throughout the country ever since. I'm proud to be associated with this group. They're a talented group. Next slide, please. So I should mention that I am a board member and the director of the Government Affairs Committee for the Minnesota Marijuana Association. We are striving to become the leading voice for the sort of growing cannabis business community in Minnesota. I am a lawyer, but I'm also a lobbyist. I had previously served as the Marijuana Policy Project lobbyist in 2019, pushing for legalization. I also lobbied in favor of the edible cannabinoid product law that led, accidentally in some ways, to the proliferation of hemp-derived THC beverages throughout Minnesota. And now many of our clients are exporting those products for sale throughout the country. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Vicente has tremendous resources that can advise you on where you can sell similar hemp-derived products. We maintain close watch on the laws and regulations in all 50 states because they're constantly changing. So if you'd like more information on that, please reach out to me. But the focus today, of course, is to talk about the exciting oncoming launch of the adult use cannabis business in Minnesota. Next slide, please. Thank you. Oh, Jay, you're reading my mind. Okay, so here's the overview of what we're going to discuss today. The social equity criteria updates, social equity pre-approval licensing process, and cannabis licensing application process. We in Minnesota, we like to be unique. So we did something that no other state, to my knowledge, has done before. We passed a legalization bill in 2023. And then even before we could issue any licenses, we essentially reworked it dramatically. Our Office of Cannabis Management pushed forward some legislation that, of course, moved us from a merit-based licensing process to a lottery, and also added some new social equity verification criteria that I will discuss now. Next. Very good, Jay. Okay, so in the 2023 bill, social equity criteria included, and I'm speaking very generally now, people with cannabis convictions and their relatives. So if you were a dependent or a spouse of someone with a cannabis conviction, you could also yourself qualify for social equity. Also, emerging farmers could qualify for social equity. And then low-income people who reside in low-income neighborhoods or quote-unquote over-policed neighborhoods could also qualify. And then also veterans who had cannabis convictions. We have modified a lot of those through the amended statute. Number one is shown in blue here. We put, I guess, more precisely, a more precise definition upon what those low-income neighborhoods are. And in fact, our Office of Cannabis Management had a very handy tool where you could just simply type in your address to find out if you would qualify based on your address. And again, because this license application process is not just open to Minnesota, you could type that address in no matter where you were in the United States. Also, some of the new language in the bill clarified that any social equity applicant didn't necessarily need to have a 100% controlling interest in the business, but a 65% controlling interest. That was through what are called true party and interest provisions in the bill. And it also clarified that no one applicant can own 10% or more of any one cannabis application, any business that was seeking a cannabis application. Next slide, please. Okay, so like I said, we modified some of those existing social equity criteria. Probably the biggest change was the addition that all military veterans, regardless of whether they'd had a cannabis charge or not, would now qualify as social equity applicants. So we'll see this in some slides coming up, but roughly, I think it's more than half of the applicants use that particular criterion to seek social equity status, because obviously it dramatically increased the number of people who would be eligible. We also firmed up the definition of the emerging farmer. And frankly, a lot of our existing hemp farmers were able to apply and get verified for social equity under this new definition. Let me see. Next slide, please. So OCM received a little north of 1,800 applications, and they're currently in the process of reviewing those. I understand that it's taking quite some time for each application to be reviewed, and that although OCM isn't making any guarantees, they're optimistic that they'll be done with the review this year and that the lottery will be done this year. There is not a lot of detail coming out of OCM on that process. I think they don't want to make any promises they can't keep. But again, we're all optimistic that this review process and the lottery will be finished this year. And as I understand it, none of the applicants will be hearing anything from OCM until OCM has gone through all, I think it's 1,818 applications. So I know a lot of my clients are nervous that they're not hearing anything, but I'm told that it's nothing to worry about. And until the review process is done, no one is likely to hear anything. Let's see. So yes, I keep calling this a licensing process. This is actually what OCM and the statute refer to as a licensing pre-approval process, because the idea here is our legislature and OCM have recognized that social equity programs have failed virtually everywhere. So these are pre-approvals that people will be receiving through the lottery this year. They are not immediately operational as licenses, with the idea that with a pre-approval in hand, these social equity applicants who might not have access to capital and resources like others may then use that pre-approval to go out and raise capital and locate property to operate their businesses. You can't be plant touching until your license becomes operational, which will happen once OCM is done with the rules and regulations that will guide the industry. There is a draft floating around of those rules. As I understand it, there will be at least one more draft circulated. And as I understand it, OCM expects that the rules will be adopted sometime in the first quarter of 2025. At such point, those pre-approvals should become operational. Next slide. Okay, so like I said, you can't be plant touching until the pre-approval converts into a license, but you can, of course, start to raise money, can identify property, start building out your business, of course, so you're ready to hit the ground running once the pre-approval is converted into a license. And, one thing to note, if, God forbid, your lottery ball isn't drawn in the lottery, there is a provision where you can ask OCM to hold on to your application for entry into the social equity round next year. I'll discuss that in more detail later, but fortunately, you don't have to pay the application fee again, which I thought was a sort of a nice touch in our legislation. We're trying to be gentle. Next slide, Jay. So during this pre-approval licensing process, there are some caps on the number of licenses OCM is issuing. Generally speaking, the legislature has favored the micro-business license type. So micro-business and meso-business are our only two vertically integrated license types that would allow you to grow, manufacture, and sell cannabis products. The micro-business license type had a very small application fee, so it was quite popular among the applicants. The meso-business license type also allows you to grow, manufacture, and sell at a bigger canopy size, and it also gives you 3 retail locations. That was also a very popular license type, but the application itself was more expensive. Interestingly enough, some of these license types, if you see the caps here on the right in pink here, there weren't a number of applicants that exceeded the cap. So in that case, OCM won't even conduct a lottery for those licenses. They will simply evaluate whether your application satisfies the relatively modest thresholds. And as I understand it, you'll get a license. Next slide, please. So I said a couple times that these pre-approvals are not plant touching, with the exception of those license types that have a cultivation component to them. So this is something I pushed OCM and our legislature for, and I'm grateful that they allowed this to become law. We are allowing those license holders, or I guess pre-approval holders, who have a cultivation component to begin growing as soon as their lottery balls are drawn. So long as you comply with your local codes and you're complying with our current medical cannabis rules and regulations, you can start growing immediately when your license is pulled, subject to OCM's approval, of course. But the idea here is that you obviously got to grow the plants before you have any products to sell. And of course, something that if you're on the ground in Minnesota, you know, sort of the elephant in the room, our tribal nations have been growing, manufacturing, and selling cannabis products for some time. They're sovereign nations, of course, and there, some of them at least, are in the in discussions with the state of Minnesota to enter agreements that might allow them to open dispensaries off tribal land. So I think it will be some time before we see dispensaries licensed by OCM opening in Minnesota, but tribal dispensaries off tribal land might be something we see in Minnesota relatively soon. Next slide. Okay, so here are the breakdown of lottery applicants. As you can see, the micro business, again, very popular, very modest license application fee. Retailer, of course, is also super popular. And again, wholesaler, transporter, testing facility, like I said, those will not be subject to a lottery, as I understand the statute. And I think a lot of people, if they had it to do it over, may have applied for one or more of those licenses. But, you know, relatively speaking, I thought we would actually get more applications. So a little north of 1,800, still a heck of a lot, but not as many as, frankly, as I was anticipating. Next slide, please. Here's a breakdown of the social equity verification criteria that are associated with the applicants. Convictions, of course, supported either for the applicant or through a family relationship supported. What is that? Math. A little north of 800 applicants. And of course, the military veterans, as I said, were more than half of the applicants. Next slide. So there will be other licensing rounds in 2025, and I just lost power. Holy smokes. My goodness.
Jason, we can still see you.
Am I back?
I can hear you and see you.
That was crazy. Yay. The show is going on. I'm back. You know that cold sweat you get? Okay, here we go. Okay, so in 2025, there will be 2 licensing rounds for another round for social equity applicants. So all those verification criteria apply. And then another round for everyone else. And the license caps, as you see on the right there, there will be a total of 100 licenses issued for mesos, 50 for cultivators, 24 for manufacturers, 150 for retailers. Half of those numbers are reserved for social equity applicants. And the pre-approvals that we've been discussing will count towards those caps. Interestingly, there's no cap for the number of micro business licenses they will be issuing. And I don't think there's any plan to cap those ever. So this whole law was based on the legislator's notion to provide a craft cannabis industry for small businesses, and the micro business license type is sort of viewed as a microbrewery equivalent. And that is why they are favoring that license type through this legislation. Next slide. Oh, well, does that look weird to you too, Jay? Questions? Okay. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Open it up for questions.
It did look a little weird, but I'm also going to bring up Frank and put us this way. And we do have at least one question. I got some email questions in, and there's one question that came in the chat. This goes back to, I think, the social equity licenses question.
Yep.
This goes to Jason. Are those licenses going to be transferable? And if so, do they need to operationalize first, or is there some waiting period? Meaning, if they qualify for the social equity, they get a license. I mean, my words, not this question, but like, can they sell it?
Yeah, great question. Yes, you can transfer. If your lottery ball gets pulled and you get a pre-approval that will eventually mature into a license. When it becomes operational, so remember that's after OCM finishes rules and regs, yes, you can sell it to another applicant who would qualify for social equity status. You cannot transfer it to someone who wouldn't qualify for social equity status for 3 years after it becomes operational. So I think there may be a secondary market for licenses. I imagine a lot of people who applied for micro businesses in particular, because that application fee was $500, might be flipping it to other people. And as long as that's possible, as long as the seller or the buyer, I guess, of the license is another person who would qualify for social equity.
Okay. I have another question. I'm going to put it on screen, actually. Any sense of when the next social equity pre-approval process may reopen for 2025, or whether they will reopen it to receive more applications for the current round?
Good question. I don't think they will be reopening it for the current round. I think they're going to wait until rules and regs are done. Again, projected to be first quarter 2025 to conduct the next pre-approval round for social equity applicants. You know, as I was reading that, I thought perhaps they were asking if there would be another round of social equity verification, because if you're involved here in Minnesota, there was a 2-step process. First, you had to get verified as a social equity applicant. And once you were, then you were eligible to apply for an application. That I don't know if they'll do. I know that wasn't the question, but I'm just kind of musing myself about that. Frank, I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
No, that's been a question we've discussed.
Okay.
A couple more questions. There's more questions. Here's another one. Is there a clear path for hemp and marijuana licenses to be in the same location? Good question. I know that in New York, this is a thing.
Co-locate. So the statute itself says you may not simultaneously own both a hemp business and an adult use cannabis, aka marijuana business. So if they're in the same location, that would introduce an issue, I would see. But at the same time, the cannabis manufacturing license would allow you to manufacture low-dose hemp edibles, as they're going to be called soon. That's a good question. I think you would need to separate those to make sure they're separate businesses. If it's strictly a hemp business operating in the same location as a adult use cannabis business.
Okay. Here's another one. What does it mean for the incumbent groups? Do they fully participate, or do they have to pay to play like in New York and have some limits as to when they can get into the adult use market?
These are very good questions. What a smart group of people.
Well, the person who asked this knows what he's talking about, but yeah.
Okay. No. So unlike a lot of states that after they pass an adult use cannabis bill, they allow their existing medical cannabis companies to simply convert to the adult use market. We're not allowing that to happen. And in fact, we only have 2 medical operators currently. They're not even necessarily going to get automatically licensed. OCM is telling them they need to apply like everyone else. And there is a new license type called a medical combination business, which would conceivably serve our current 2 operators. But it really restricts their ability to sell into the adult use market. And it's a kind of a complicated formula. And, legislation's a sausage making process. Sometimes all this stuff doesn't make complete sense, but generally speaking, they're going to be allowed to sell adult use products. Or I should say they can grow adult use flower equivalent to 50% of the canopy of medical cannabis they grew in the prior year. I think that's it. I haven't looked at it in a while. It's confusing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But as most people know, the medical marijuana market, I mean, the patients will probably begin to self-medicate, right? And that medical cannabis market will more than likely wither and sort of go away for everyone, really, except for patients with unique needs and for kids, of course. So our medical providers here are certainly not happy and do not view that as a acceptable compromise.
This question, I'm going to put it on the screen, goes more nitty gritty, almost land usey. I understand the law provided the ability for municipality to limit retail locations to 1 per 12,500 residents. Are there any rules allowing a city or county to opt out and directly prohibit a business in their jurisdiction?
No. That was an easy one. So our legislature watched what happened in California in particular, where they did allow localities to opt out. And of course, that should be no surprise. The illicit market is happy to fill that void. And if you're allowing that to happen, then you're not really solving the problem of allowing, legalizing adult use cannabis, regulating it, making sure the products are safe. Because if you continue to allow the illicit market to thrive, then they're undercutting the legitimate businesses paying taxes, being regulated, and doesn't solve the problem. So yeah, I'm very proud of our legislature. They took a lot of hits on that, especially from a lot of local governments who have no interest in cannabis yet. But that was a political move that was unpopular, but I think policy-wise was the right thing to do.
There's a series of questions on this topic or theme. What is known about the non-social equity application process? Will there be an application round in 2024 or 2025? And sort of a corollary question came up as well. Like, what is the best process if you're not social equity applicant? Like, what should you be doing now? Is there partnership opportunities with social equity applicants? Sort of this whole theme.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally doing a lot of matchmaking right now, because a lot of our social equity applicants are new to the cannabis business. And, there's a lot of money and interest from out of state who have operated successfully in adult use states before, looking to team up with people. So to answer the question, the licensing round for people who don't qualify for social equity, we're expecting will be in Q1 2025. I don't know if that's going to be conducted at the same time as the next social equity round or later. I don't know if OCM knows either. There's nothing in statute indicating when those things need to occur. But what can you be doing now? I mean, there is a bit of a land rush going on. I mean, people are gobbling up the good retail locations, in border communities, Minneapolis and St. Paul. So that's something you can start doing. And I'm connected with real estate brokers, helping people with those sorts of things.
There's this question came up, which is interesting, and we've seen in other markets. Like, do you anticipate a bottleneck in the testing process?
100%. Somebody asked me what keeps you up at night about all this, and that is it. Like, we've seen what happens when you don't have enough testing labs, and I'm worried that we're heading down that path. I chatting informally with Senator Port. There may be something in the works to incentivize people to apply for testing labs. I think we got 6 applicants for that. We don't know if they're all going to get approved, but we need lots of testing labs. And it's
more than 6.
Expensive enterprise, but it's necessary, of course.
Yep. This question sort of related to hemp farmers. Are there going to be any social equity for hemp farms that have reported farm loss instead of profit? Hemp farms are going to struggle. Yeah.
Well, I did identify that quote unquote emerging farmer category that we revised. And I think, it would allow a lot of our hemp farmers to qualify in that. So I think it depends on your situation, but yes, I think hemp farmers in certain circumstances could qualify for social equity.
Can I ask a question, Jason, that is sort of follow on to that? Like, what is the latest with the hemp-derived THC beverage scene in Minnesota? Because I think the latest that I heard, but you follow a lot closer, like now you can get on like draft hemp infused beverages at breweries. Is that right?
Yes. So that was one of our big changes. We formally adopted on tap hemp-derived THC beverages. I think there's only one brewery doing that. And I don't know if others are going to join in, but yes, in Minneapolis, frankly, most of Minnesota, you can go to virtually any restaurant or bar and order a hemp-derived THC beverage. And you can order an alcoholic beverage. And then, oh my gosh, I lost my thing again. I don't know.
You're good. We hear you.
Great. I'm going to keep talking. So that is the revolution is alive and well, and it shows no sign of slowing down. That market will continue to be preserved even as our adult use cannabis market comes online. And we expect that both markets will continue to flourish. And a lot of my hemp-derived THC clients are exporting their products for sale all across the country. They're for sale in Total Wine stores now, which has really caused that market to explode. Texas apparently is going gangbusters these days, so it's really exciting.
This question, waste disposal licenses. Is this something that's on your radar?
I have not heard. I mean, I heard rumors about this. That is not an active license type at the moment. I'd love to hear more about that. I don't really understand it.
Yeah. Any anticipate? I don't know if you've answered this. Any expected changes to the social equity licensing criteria during the next sort of legislative session? I guess.
Yeah. Yes. So again, if you're following this closely, here's what we did. Right, we expunged criminal records of people with cannabis convictions, and then we made evidence of that criminal record something you needed to prove your eligibility for social equity. That was something we probably would not do the same way again. So a lot of people had difficulty finding their records.
Because they were expunged. So the
correct. So I was doing
you needed to have the record in order to get the license, but you expunged the record and then
yes, it was
unintended
consequence. Yes. Yeah. Did we say that at the same time?
Probably.
Yeah, it was not great. And a lot of people found that even though they thought they had a conviction, what they actually had was a plea deal that helped them avoid a conviction. And, I'm not a criminal lawyer. I was learning a lot of this stuff for the first time. And so the legislature might be taking a look at adding charges as qualifying. I don't know. There are rumors flying around.
And that was so that's, wow. Okay. As you know, Jason, Frank, in the industry, nothing really happens in a vacuum. Like, we're talking about Minnesota, contained by the borders of Minnesota, but like, what else is happening in surrounding states, or maybe broader the Midwest, that like either has an impact or is being part of the consideration of how Minnesota is rolling out? Because again, nothing really happens in a vacuum. You just mentioned border towns, right? Those border locations become super desirable in the startup, but also become really challenging if they're on a border of a state that's about to go legal. Yeah.
So a couple of things that make Minnesota such a great business opportunity are, number one, we're not allowing our medical cannabis providers to simply convert over, and sort of, it's kind of a blank slate in that way, but also because we're surrounded by essentially prohibition states. Of course, Michigan, Illinois are legal states. South Dakota has a medical market. North Dakota has a medical market, but we do expect the border towns to do quite well. We expect a lot of cannabis tourism here. Of course, we know there are ballot measures in November in North Dakota, South Dakota. Not necessarily, South Dakota is not really a legalization measure. It's something similar, but Wisconsin isn't going to have adult use cannabis for a long time. And I think those border towns in Minnesota near Wisconsin will do quite well.
Yeah. This is more nitty gritty, less sort of border, but are there going to be different packaging regulations for cannabis versus hemp in the state, or any foreseen packaging changes? Thank you, Sadie.
Packaging. All that is laid out in statute. I don't have it memorized. I'm sorry. If you want to shoot me an email, I can send you all those details. The rules and regs, like I said, they've issued a first draft, but the rules and regs were pretty thin on details. So I think in the next draft, we may get more detail on some of that stuff.
You talked a little bit about, but I was switching your screen at the time. You talked about the licensing timeline, and you talked a bit about tribal nations opening up. But when do you expect, an example, when do you expect a full-blown adult use cannabis dispensary near your house, Jason, in the Twin Cities?
One that isn't operated by one of our tribal nations?
Yes. Yes, that's right.
Well, Frank, I'd love to hear your prediction. Yeah. I am guessing mid to late summer 2025.
Oh, Okay.
I'm hopeful.
I don't know that I have a specific timeline to counter Jason's. I think he may even be a bit optimistic. But the few things to watch to get to the point where that's even something to discuss a specific time is maybe a few things. That the cultivation issue and that Jason brought up, and the timing it takes to have a supply in a commercial market. You got to have product on the shelf. The access to capital is going to be extremely interesting to watch, and ultimately the rulemaking process. Never an easy thing. Never goes as quickly as you think. Always subject to challenges and the like. So, assuming all the stars align, that might be a good prediction. I think he may be a little optimistic.
I'm always an optimist.
Ever the optimist. I appreciate you both being with us today, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of partnerships we have going forward as well. And thank you, everybody, for registering, for attending. Again, you will get a copy and a link to how to watch this again, to slow it down, to speed it up, slow down the really important part, speed up the part when I talk. But I appreciate you, Jason. Appreciate you, Frank. Frank, thank you as well for your partnership. Jason from Vicente as well. I'm going to say goodbye to you and wrap up the program, but it won't be the last time that we spend time together, which I'll talk about in a sec. But Jason and Frank, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that is it. Again, thank you, Jason. Thank you, both Jason himself, but also the team at Vicente. Thank you, Frank, and the team at the Minnesota Marijuana Association. If you like this program today, you'll love what this group has planned in Las Vegas alongside MJ BizCon. Specifically, you will get invited to a Minnesota reception in Las Vegas on the 3rd, and likely a breakfast session on the 4th. So keep your ears, eyes, and inboxes open for those details from us, from the Minnesota Marijuana Association, from Vicente as well. You will be getting that as time goes on. And as I said, you'll be getting a recap of this program with links to the presentation and how to get in touch with everybody you heard from today. So look for that tomorrow. Thank you again to the MMA and Vicente for your partnership, Frank and Jason. Watch your inboxes to follow. And if you want more from what's happening at the Cultivated team, go to cultivated.news. You'll find everything there. I expect to see a huge rush of people getting our newsletter in their inbox tomorrow. Again, thank you very much, everybody. We will see you down the road and at the next webinar.